As you can see, it is currently raining in New York. And here's what this means. First of all, it's going to be raining on and off for the next 2 days about, and we could see on and off rain through the next 5. This is going to lower temperatures. High temperatures we can expect to be in the low 60s to even upper 50s. Low temperatures should be in the low 50s, but at the end of the system, we could and hopefully should see low temperatures fall to the upper 40s. Most of Long Island has not fallen into the 40s since May 1st, but New York City has not fallen into the 40s since April 27th, and if that holds, that's a record, since every May has hit the 40s at least once before. So if New York City can't drop below 50 in May, that's a record. But if it drops below 50 this weekend, then a record won't happen. So just keep your eyes and ears out open for that. In any case, though, this rain could very well be over 2 inches. Possibly, I've seen models say up to 4 inches in parts of Connecticut, and even in parts of Long Island could see over 3 inches of rain throughout the system. That's almost a month's worth of rain coming down in one shot. So almost a month's worth of rain could come down in just that, one clip. And some areas are doing better off than others. On May 3rd at Central Park, so last night, almost an inch of rain poured down in an evening set of thunderstorms. However, Newark, New Jersey reported just a 1/4 inch of rain, and most of the other spots in the metro area got squat. Bridgeport, Islip, and other parts of Long Island did record around 1/8 of an inch of rain on the morning of Friday, May 2nd. But a lot of those storms dodged the city, so some parts of the metro area didn't get rain from either one. And, the last time there was consistent rain across the metro area was on the 26th of April. And it was awfully inconsistent with where the rain wound up falling. Like, the rain itself was inconsistently spread. Seeing as, New York City got 0.82 inches of rain. Some of the outer suburbs only had around 0.4 inches of rain. But we're starting to get into the time of year where rainfall is going to be a lot more dispersed based on them being in strong lines of thunderstorms, which obviously can vary immensely in terms of just a few miles where the heaviest precipitation lies. So, with that being said, this could actually be one of the final instances of us having steady rain that's not just pouring down until the fall. Last year, there was steady pouring rain that came down in several instances in May. May 15th and 16th was probably the last one of it just coming down gently. Seeing as the 23rd and 27th, as well as the 29th, it came down in violent thunderstorms. June 6th was sort of awkward because on the one hand there was some consistent rain, but even then it was still heavy, even though it was more consistent, and that's rare. The dew point also swelled up to 75 degrees when it happened, though, so take that as you will. And then, after that, like pretty much every single time it rained in June, it was just a severe storm. July, again, you had multiple instances of strong, severe storms over the city. It wasn't quite the same, but it was still, you had this like stormy sense of like extremely heavy rainfall and in July. And same too in August. Like, even if there wasn't a thunderstorm, when it rained, it came down hard. Except for the one day that there was light rain on August 7th and 8th, but that was an anomaly in of itself, considering that temperatures as daytime highs were being held to 70 degrees, which was practically a record. What I'm trying to get at here is that generally, you don't have, rain comes down in very heavy clips. After this point, this could be the last time of a gentle rainfall, which is important because that's what the grass needs. And what I'm going to get at here is the drought. which I know I've referenced a lot, but, you know, at this point, I don't think we're going to have enough rain to have a dagger. But at the same time, I don't think the drought is going to end before next fall at best. It's annoying too. The area started to become abnormally dry at the start of October. Moderate drought was introduced by the end of October, and the area was in a state of severe drought across almost the entire metro area starting in mid-November. Late November, the rain finally starts. Multiple inches come down in just a few days, but it takes until mid-December for there to be improvement to moderate drought. However, at the same time, abnormally dry conditions are finally introduced back into parts of Long Island. So there's significant improvement there. But the city and all that stuff is just, moderate drought. Looking at the drought updates, the city and most of the metro area is put into a drought watch in mid-November, drought warning, in early November, drought warning in mid-November, put back into drought watch in mid-December, and then out of drought in early January. On November 9th, the mayor puts in a grilling ban for the city that's undone on December 9th. And, December does bring 4 to 6 inches of rain throughout the metro area in multiple events that occur throughout the month from the storms from December 9th to 11th, and then December 16th also had lots of heavy rain, and then December 28th to 31st, the year ended with lots of precipitation. January became one of the driest on record after that, though, so no improvement, just the status quo. And again, you're lucky it didn't degrade because it easily could have. February starts off wet, and by mid-February, most of Long Island is abnormally dry. Parts of it are even out of drought, but then it doesn't really rain for 3 weeks. By early March, there's a strong storm that moves through the metro area, and again, Long Island and most of New York City, except for a very small sliver of Manhattan, is finally back to abnormally dry, and eventually Manhattan follows suit in early April. And, March consistently saw, again, 4 to 6 inches of rain throughout the metro area. Compared to April, not as much, generally around 2 to 3 inches of rain throughout the metro. So, basically the point is, September was dry, October was the driest month on record. November was a dry start, but it was a wet finish, so it averaged out. December was wetter than average. January was, again, close to historically dry levels, the same way September was close to historically dry levels. February was, in some areas, wetter than average, in a lot of areas, drier than average. March was wet, April was dry. That's the most important thing that you need to recognize out of all this, is just when did the patterns occur. So if May can be a wet month, that could help with drought, but it's not going to undo it. And here's the thing. It's annoying to have to enter the middle of spring and into the later stages of spring. You never want to enter the second half of spring in drought, which technically most of the area is still in with it being abnormally dry. Most of the area is technically in a state of drought. It's D0, but still. Never a good thing to enter this in drought. Because you see, the reason as to why the drought didn't really degrade in January was because it was cold outside, especially because it was a colder than average January, and the sun was weak. Sun angles start off as 27 degrees in January. They only really peak at around 33. Oh, it's starting to pick up. But this is a live vlog, so you're seeing what's going on. In May, though, the sun angle starts off at 64 degrees and ends at 71 degrees. So the sun angle is becoming very intense. Temperatures are warming up too, and it's forecast to again be a relatively warm stretch. New York City hit 84 on May 2nd, 85 on May 3rd, And even though most of the metro area was cooler, if you're on Long Island, like think mid-70s instead of mid-80s, point still is that's warmer than average. The last 12 days of April, so starting on April 19th, were the warmest end of 12 days of April on record throughout the metro area. It was close to record warm, which made sense when you realize how almost every single day was getting in there into the 70s when it's not supposed to be that way. April 25th even set a record for warmest low temperature in several spots, and LaGuardia Airport set a record on April 19th for record high temperature. So this was never a good situation. It's kind of almost like you're in the most hostile conditions for drought improvement possible. Like you really are. This is about as hostile for drought improvement as you can get. It's warm, but the humidity is still relatively low, and it's dry. This is how flash droughts happen. And the worst part is that you're already starting off in a bad spot. 2022, at least most of the metro area had April and May precipitation as near average. March 2022 wasn't, too far below average. Same with February. So at least you weren't starting off in drought. At least it took until, mid-July for drought to be introduced. And even then, the whole metro area in severe drought by early September. And it takes until, for quite a few areas, it takes until November to pull out of drought. Some areas are still struggling with drought in January 2023. Fast forward in 2023 a few months to May, and even though April ended on a very wet note and was one of the wettest Aprils on record, May, was very dry, and so was June. One of the driest May-June combos on record, and that sort of pushed the area into moderate drought by the end of June. Now, eventually this gets resolved in July. By August, the area's out of drought. And by September, you're dealing with flash floods. But my point is that it's never good to enter it. Abnormally dry conditions were even introduced by mid-July after a dry June. August undid all that. And then you have the drought that we're in now. That's not a flash drought. You have that ugly situation where we're still trying to make up ground here, and it's just a really ugly spot to be in, considering how much rainfall is needed. But what my point is that you had all those flash droughts in the summer that I mentioned, where you started on a baseline of you're not in drought. The baseline in this case is abnormally dry conditions. It's only going to get worse. It's only going to get a million times worse from here, which is why this rain is a very good thing, especially with how gentle it is. Soak the ground up, considering that, it's all nice and green. Soak it up, give it water. At this point, the rate of evaporation on a clear sunny day starts to exceed the rate that rainfall can come in. There's not too much evaporation from the ground in January, but by May, 1/4 of an inch of rain can be absorbed from the ground. And remember, the daily average is only about 1/6 of an inch of rain. So if everything breaks even, drought actually does escalate. And then you realize that the rain can't even absorb nicely, and it oftentimes runs off. Like, it's tough in the summer to avoid drought. So having this nice gentle rain come in could actually give the ground, if it's 3 inches, almost 2 weeks of rain, where we don't sort of have to worry about what's going on if there's then a dry period. This won't last forever, but it's a good starting point. Also, it's good that it's consistent, because sometimes the areas that don't really need it get it when it's not consistent, so I think that that's a good thing.